I cannot believe that I once again have to sit up here and talk about PJ Tucker and a potential return to the Philadelphia 76ers, but here we are. I thought the 3 games that he spent this season before the James Harden trade ultimately happened and he was shipped off to the Los Angeles Clippers along with James Harden. I thought that those days were over, that the PJ Tucker story would be a closed chapter in the Philadelphia Sixers storyline, but it does not seem to fully be the case. Now, a report came out here originally coming from Hardwood Paroxysm, which is a guy that works for the Action Network, and the quote that he states is, PJ Tucker would prefer a new home where he can contribute, but the only teams interested are direct competitors for the NBA title. The Nuggets, 76ers, and Suns are among the interested teams, but likely only if he is bought out. I want no part of PJ Tucker on the Sixers team under any circumstances. Now, I will preface that by saying I've been mostly positive of PJ Tucker during his time with the Sixers, that I know he was a bit of a guy that people came down quite a bit on and were really frustrated with, and I understand it, that there was basically zero offense in his game, that the version of PJ Tucker that came to the Sixers is far from the high-caliber playoff performer that he used to be. There was a point in time where PJ Tucker was an incredibly high-level player, a near perfect role player on a contending team, but those days are long gone. That the world, time never stops. Aging hits everyone differently, and it has smacked PJ Tucker in the face. I mean, when I pull up his stats here, we're talking about his first minutes in the NBA coming during the 2006-2007 season. This should not be embarrassing, PJ Tucker. You should not be afraid that you have outlived most of your former draft classmates and everyone else in the league. It is okay for those days to be over. Now, it is clear why there is frustration here, that if I want to pull up his recent game logs and him playing, you see a ton of DNPs, of coach decisions do not play with the Clippers, that he's pretty much completely fallen out of the rotation in Los Angeles. This comes after the fact that he did get some true opportunities when he first was traded there to pull these up once again. As you can see, the first handful of games that he's getting 14 minutes, 15 minutes, 12 minutes, 22 minutes, that he was getting the PJ Tucker opportunity that we've seen. The Clippers ultimately decided to go a different direction, that he was not a hard staple part of their rotation, and they probably the right call for that franchise and for that team. Now, from the Sixers' perspective, I want to start by addressing this initial report saying that only if he's bought out. That is a key factor in things, that we know that PJ Tucker is a guy that comes with a hefty contract for what he is at this point in his career. And why do we know that so well? Is because the Sixers were the ones that made him sign on the dotted line. And just a reminder for what exactly that contract is, a 3-year, $33 million deal that he signed under Daryl Morey. He's in the final season of it next year as a player option. $11 million that he's making this year, and an $11.5 million player option for next season. And you better believe that if he gets that opportunity, he is taking that player option, that there is zero world in which another team gives PJ Tucker anything close to that money at this point in his career, because as I mentioned, it's crystal clear that his best days are behind him. Now, for the Sixers specifically, we've talked a lot about Tucker. There are the good moments, that he was a guy that stepped up in the biggest moments, and there were things that he brought to the table that I appreciated, that his toughness, his leadership, his attitude were all things that were very valuable to this team. And I don't think anything articulates it better than this play right here from Tucker in the playoffs.
This has been a strength of PJ Tucker, who's given Joel an earful saying, be aggressive. Weak side of the floor, beats you to the spot. Malcolm Brogdon compounds the error, a chance to tie it up. PJ Tucker, been in the league a long time. Timely, toughness, competition, and then a little...
I don't mean to rag on the guy. There were good moments, and for what he was, he did provide some sort of value to this team. But the bottom line is there is this trade-off between talent, effectiveness, actual production on the court that you can only swallow so much when you're really leaning towards the leadership, the toughness, the intangibles. And frankly, if you want to look at the Sixers roster this year, there's a guy named Patrick Beverley who brings a lot of the same traits with a little more on-court ability. That Pat Bev at this point in his career has far more basketball life left in his legs than PJ Tucker does in his. And for bringing similar attributes, and to be honest, I would even argue that Pat Bev takes it a step forward due to the way that he is so expressive, so vocal. PJ Tucker was such a lead-by-example guy that it was rare that we saw those moments of him getting in Joel Embiid's ear, yelling in his face. And as I mentioned, Tucker did step up in big moments. That in Game 7, he was knocking down threes when the rest of the team didn't show up. That particular moment against the Celtics right there, that was an and one. He connected on the free throw to tie the game with a minute to play. There were big moments that PJ Tucker did answer the call. But there's also so much standing around. And as far as a guy that can, help this team survive the regular season and potentially help take them over the edge in the playoffs, I just don't think he's that guy anymore. And as we look at the Sixers roster as a whole, as I pull up the depth chart here, that as you can see, the typical starting lineup of Tyrese Maxey, DeAnthony Melton, Tobias Harris, Nico Batum, and Joel Embiid. Then you look towards the second unit for some of the replacements to PJ Tucker. We have Kelly Oubre, Marcus Morris Sr., Tobias dropped into the second unit as a forward for this one. Paul Reed, Mo Bamba, Robert Covington. Those are all guys that I believe are better options for this Sixers team than PJ Tucker. That while there are teams that I think he does make sense on, and I think the Suns is an intriguing fit based on how low usage that Tucker likes to be offensively and that he can pick up some of the defensive slack, there is some still defensive ability that he does possess. I think about the moments of him matching up with Nikola Jokic and Giannis specifically in a Sixers uniform that did stand out and make an impact. Tucker being able to be the guy that faces up those players and allow Joel Embiid to be more of a rim protector, a guy that floats, a free safety, if you will, of the Sixers defense. So there are positive attributes there. But for this Sixers team, let's talk about these names a little bit. For Kelly Oubre specifically, one of the things that has drastically stood out to me about Kelly's impact this year is him staying in the dunker spot. That was oftentimes where PJ Tucker's role was. And guess what? It's a little more effective having a guy in the dunker spot that can actually dunk in Kelly Oubre Jr. And beyond that, he does have a nice little touch around the rim, a way that Tucker unfortunately does not at his career. That Kelly Oubre has been much more effective in that exact role, not on the same side of things defensively, although Kelly's been far better defensively than I expected this point, or that he has been advertised as throughout his NBA career. Then a couple other options. Marcus Morris Sr. Once again, not the defensive stalwart that PJ Tucker kind of has himself pinned as, but Marcus Morris Sr. hit some big shots already. He's a professional scorer. He's a guy that I was pretty low on coming into the deal, and I think brings a lot of that Philly toughness, is proud to be here. A lot of the same intangibles as Tucker. He just plays in a different way, and still a guy that I would argue has more left in his basketball legs at this point in his career than Tucker has in his. Robert Covington is every bit of the defender PJ Tucker is. That they do some similar things as far as both guys have played small ball center in the Houston Rockets system. Both guys have played, I guess, for their size, a larger position, been better rebounders than they are supposed to be. Covington's not been a guy that's been a staple of the Sixers rotation, not a guy that Nick Nurse seems to love or be really committed to getting minutes for. But he is a guy that can answer the call when the moment is needed, that if there needs to be that defensive lockdown option. Covington, while he's not a seamless fit on every single matchup, is a guy that I think could be up to that challenge. So for PJ Tucker specifically, it is tough looking at the Sixers team. And real quick, I didn't even touch on Nico Batum, who frankly I just think is a better basketball player by every definition of the world than PJ Tucker. That defensively, I think Batum is just fine. We've seen him match up with some really tough tasks. I mean, in that Atlanta game, he was facing off against Trae Young. We've seen him on Jason Tatum at moments, some of these big-time defenders. That is something I have some concern with in the long run, but the bottom line is Batum's accepting the challenge, and I do have to give him credit for that. The quick-release three-pointers, it's not even close, just how decisive Batum is and really how efficient that he's been on some of these impressive, tough catch-and-shoot opportunities. And then as a passer, it's another world than what PJ Tucker does. That the ability of Nico Batum to make those entry passes to Joel Embiid, to just be a connective passer within the flow of the Sixers offense, that's a big deal to this team. That while Tyrese Maxey has taken such massive strides as a playmaker and very clear, far advanced compared to what I think the expectations was to this point, he's still not the point guard by the purest definition. That he is a guy that is still have some score-first tendencies. So having a player like Nico Batum to help balance that and connect things in the half-court setting is a big deal. I don't want to be the anti-PJ Tucker guy, that I do appreciate what he brought to this franchise. I was not as frustrated by some of the empty box scores as I think a lot of people were, but I am ready to close that chapter of the book. I have zero interest in PJ Tucker being the guy that is brought back to this team. The only world in which this happens is if the Sixers do make a trade which ends up like a 3-for-2, 3-for-1, 4-for-2 type of deal where they're trading multiple players to bring back fewer and some roster spots open up. And then there's guys like Danny Green that are already itching for that role. That Danny Green, I know firsthand, has been working out in the Sixers facility, that is staying in NBA shape, wants an opportunity, and it does seem to be a little bit of a handshake agreement there between Daryl Morey and Danny Green. That was first reported after he was released during the Harden trade in which they brought in these players. Tucker's a guy that would need to be bought out by the Clippers for this even to be brought up. I just don't see a world where this happens, nor should it. I'm not saying I don't want the Sixers wheeling and dealing. I absolutely do. That I do think this team is in the conversation of being a contender, and that one right move could take them over the edge. But that one right move is absolutely not bringing in PJ Tucker. Those are days that I do want to stay in the past. This is not a reunion that I want to welcome or see it be the case in full fruition. So shout out to PJ Tucker. I do respect and appreciate you wanting more minutes, wanting to contribute to a contender, but it might be better served to just accept a dose of reality that you are not the player that you once were. There is no shame in that. You're about to be 40 years old. That is what happens to everyone. So appreciate you. Unfortunate things aren't working out in Los Angeles, but I don't look at the Philadelphia 76ers as your lifeline to fixing that. I do want to hear if anybody disagrees with me in the comments. I would expect this is mostly an anti-PJ Tucker zone in here, but let me know your thoughts in the underneath here. Also, don't forget to smash that like button, hit that subscribe, and I will be talking with you next time right here on Sixers Digest. Peace.